Hi everyone, Professor Ming Lu back again. My special guest today is another former student of mine. His name is Jonathan Macias. So Jonathan actually took my Principles of Accounting 2 class back in spring of 2008, many, many years ago. He then transferred to San Diego State University, where he studied entrepreneurship. Later, he got his MBA from one of the top schools in the nation, the University of Pennsylvania Wharton School of Business, where he specialized in entrepreneurship and finance. Now, in regards to work experience, Jonathan has worked for a number of respectable firms. He started off as a sales associate many years ago and worked for a firm called Keller Williams. Then he worked as a financial advisor for the financial services firm Edward Jones. Today, he's actually the CEO of his own business. His company does real estate development, investment, as well as operations. And the name of his company is called the Macias Organization. He's currently also a adjunct not accounting. He's an adjunct professor at Santa Monica College and UCLA Extension, where he teaches business, finance, and real estate. So, Jonathan, thank you so much for making the time to come speak with me today.
Thank you, Ming. Thanks for having me. I'm always humbled to be here speaking to your students and with you.
Yeah, well, thanks. And I want to mention to my viewers that Jonathan's always made time to come speak to my come to my class to speak to my students. But today, I wanted to make a video with him so that more people can hear the great things he has to say. So let's get rolling. The first question I have for you, Jonathan, is I mentioned before that you have your own real estate development investment operations firm. Can you talk a little bit more about that company and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. My company is really a combination of firms, and we take distressed assets, undervalued property, and we build luxury homes ground up, mostly all development. We also do some multi-unit property development. And on top of that, we have brokerage services where we service clients who buy and sell property, as well as property management, and also consulting services on the design and construction side. And I like to say that anything that has the word real estate in it, we probably do it. And it's a nice thing to have for a lot of our clients, where we're able to handle A to Z of the entire process and makes it headache-free for them.
Since my channel is about accounting, I have to ask you about accounting. So can you talk to my viewers about how you use accounting as an entrepreneur in your business, as well as how you use accounting as a real estate investor when you make real estate investment decisions?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, accounting is the life of the business. It's telling you where everything is going and what's happening. You can't run a business without understanding the accounting, without understanding the finance. You can't do finance without knowing accounting. And as real estate investors, we work with a lot of spreadsheets, a lot of financial documents. We have to make budgets. We have to calculate returns. We have to make projections. None of that can be done without a knowing accounting. There's also partnership structuring. We have to understand how equity is distributed, how we carry preferred returns for investors, and all of that it's a lot of accounting that goes into that. And as an entrepreneur as well, we need to understand where our revenues are coming from, what our expenses. Most of my job is doing a lot of operational CFO type of work, understanding and analyzing financial statements, both for management purposes and for tax purposes. Tax is a huge thing that companies need to look at, and we focus a lot on, because we're heavily taxed as real estate investment companies, and there's a lot of advantages that real estate companies have, and we have to be aware of those and how those things are accounted for. So there's really no escaping it. Because at the end of the day, your business it all comes down to the profit that you're making. And in order to understand that, you have to understand the numbers for it to make sense.
Well, that's good to know, right? Because I think people, some young people have the false impression that to be an entrepreneur or to go into real estate, all you have to have is just strong people skills, right? You can just somehow talk your way through it, go with your gut. But from what you're telling me, right? Obviously, people skills, we all are aware that people skills are very, very important. But besides having, good people skills, it's really, really important to know the numbers, right? To be able to combine that with your people skills, and then that will really take you far in life. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, my next question for you is, like pretty much all of my guest speakers, all my former students, you were pretty much self-made. You didn't, grow up with a silver spoon in your mouth. You paid for your own MBA program, and I know the Wharton School of Business is very, very expensive. And you also founded your own business completely from scratch. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your family background? Did you grow up in a wealthy household? Did you go to private schools?
No, I like to joke that I grew up with the copper spoon. My dad was a plumber, and we dealt with a lot of copper. And we, when I was first growing up, we were working class. We lived in a very, very small studio-like place. It was, four of us. My mom was a housewife. My dad was a plumber. So it was very, very working class. I spent most of my summers working for my dad as a plumber. And that was my upbringing. Later in life, we kind of moved a little more towards middle or upper middle class. But we always grew up with understanding the value of what a dollar was and how hard it was to earn that dollar. And everything was scrutinized of how we spent that. And so a lot of the decisions, including going to Santa Monica and transferring to San Diego State, were made based on financial means, which was not the case with Wharton, because when I went to Wharton, it was the most expensive program in the world for MBAs. I think it still is. So very different than my undergrad. But a lot of it just had to do with figuring it out, working hard. No one handed anything to me. In fact, my parents made it a part of their mission to make sure we understood that everything had to be earned, and nothing was given. So I did pay for myself to go through Wharton. I was fortunate that I did have my parents to help me through undergrad and during community college when it was more affordable. But they said that's where the buck stops for them. And I pretty much took care of myself.
Got it. And you know what? Let's back up a little bit. I want to talk about your experiences back in college. When you took my accounting 2 class, you were an A student. I think you were top 10% of my class. You did really, really well. But I even remember towards the end of the semester, you were in my office. We were having a conversation, and you actually disclosed to me that when you first started off in college, you were actually making mostly C's. And so I was actually shocked by that. But something somehow changed the way you operated, right? All of a sudden, you switched from being a C student to an A student. Would you mind sharing what exactly happened?
Yeah, I grew up in probably the worst school systems in LA as a kid, just based on where we lived and the neighborhoods that we lived in. And so I never learned how to learn. I was never academically challenged by my teachers. There's always the outliers that do try, but the system wasn't there. And then going through Santa Monica was a big shock, having to figure all of that stuff out. And I think what really made the difference was, faculty. Faculty who really care, faculty like yourself, that really are focused on making the class challenging, so that the students come out with technical skills out of the class, and that we understand how it's applicable in real life. And that was something new. I maybe had a handful of teachers that have ever done that. And that had a huge impact in not only how you learn the subject, but also um, the way that content stays with you and carries over, and the lessons that you learn, and how that carries over to your other classes, and having that additional help and support and that mentorship, from professors like you. I know you were always so involved with all your students. You still are now. You do a lot of programs, and those kind of things really help, because I remember when I was a student, I didn't know what college was. I didn't know how it worked. I didn't know how to study. I didn't know what to expect. So having someone challenge you in that way really pushes your limits, and it stays with you. It really does, and I think it carries over um, to everything that you do. So
Wow, that's very nice of you to say it. I didn't actually pay you to say that, but thanks so much for sharing that. My only regret was I had hoped you would become an accountant, but instead you decided to go the entrepreneur route.
well,
But
there's account money, which is not bad. It's good, but then there's partner money. That's a little bit better. So I figured that out early too.
great, thank you. So speaking of challenges, would you mind? You mentioned that the high school you went to, didn't exactly prepare you for college, right? So that was one of the challenges. Would you mind sharing some other challenges you faced, whether it was at Santa Monica College or later on at San Diego State, Wharton School of Business, or even in your business, right? I'm sure there's tons of challenges you face. Could you share just a few of those challenges and how you were able to overcome those difficulties?
Yeah, one thing that I've learned so far, and I'm still learning every day, is that life is pretty unfair. You're always going to be at a disadvantage in some way, and it's really just been about grit, learning how to persevere. I still remember one thing that you said in your class was, you don't have to be the smartest, but you just have to be the one that works the hardest, and just hanging in there. And there's been all kinds of challenges, whether it's been financial, personal, um, um, you know, just not knowing what course of action to take. I mean, it's always come down to grit. It's always come down to, can you stay in the game? Can you keep up the momentum even when you're down? And I think I think that has been one skill that has really helped me, is just being able to take on a lot of work and persevere and keep pushing, because it's so easy to give up. I mean, look at what's going on with the world right now, right? It's so easy to just throw in the towel and say, I can't do anything. And we're still trying to find ways to keep our projects moving. We're still making deals, and a lot of it is taking advantage of the situation and trying to look at the positive in your situation. For me, I grew up as a plumber's kid, and that gave me a lot of advantages when I entered in the development world, because I had boots on the grounds. I got my hands dirty when a lot of analysts maybe have never gotten off of the desk. So you have to look at the positive in your circumstances and turn that around, and realize that not everyone gets dealt a great hand, and you just have to play the hand that you got.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I 100% agree. I mean, for me personally, grit was what carried me through a lot of, difficulties in life, right? We all wish that, everything was perfect, but unfortunately, we just have to make the best of what we have. All right, last question. If you've accomplished a great deal in your life, as I mentioned before, you have your own business, you teach at two respectable colleges. I also forgot to mention that besides all of that, you actually hire college students to work at your firm, and you also mentor them. A lot of things you don't have to do, but you just do because you really care about people. So what pieces of advice can you share with my students about how to be successful in college or in business or in life? Could you maybe give 3 or 4 tips?
Sure. I want to add, I love mentoring. I love hiring interns, because I remember being that student looking for a mentor. I remember the impact those office hours with you, what they had on me. I remember wanting to have those resources. So I try to plug myself into that world and hopefully act as a resource to students in any way that I can. But there's some things that I always tell everyone that I mentor or that are students that take my classes. Again, don't be a victim. You're always going to be dealt an unfair hand against someone else, and you just have to play that hand as best as you can. Don't play the victim card, because no one really cares, and the only person who's going to help you is yourself. And I also tell them to work the hardest. Grit is everything. You don't have to be the smartest. I remember you telling us in your class, you don't have to be the smartest, but you can work the hardest. And that's absolutely true. And it continues to be true. And then also, relationships are everything. Get those mentorships, build those relationships with faculty, with your classmates early on. Those are the people that are going to help you, that really care about you. And don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to reach out to people when you need help. I think that's the one thing I've seen students don't do enough of. I have a lot of guest speakers come to my class, and I love to see them reach out to those people more, because those are the people who really care, that are giving up those hours to be there with you. And lastly, I also I tell them to dream bigger. I would have never imagined, growing up the way that I did, coming from where I came from, the things that I would be doing now, even going to Wharton to get my MBA. To me, that was something that I could never have imagined. So I tell students to always dream bigger. Don't limit yourself. Just keep pushing as much as you can, and stretch yourself out of your comfort zone.
Jonathan, thanks for sharing all this wonderful information with my students today. For those viewers who are interested in becoming entrepreneurs or working in the real estate profession, I'm going to post Jonathan's contact information in the video description below. Oh, I also want to mention that Jonathan did another video with Santa Monica College about his experience going to school there. So I'll also post the link to that video in the video description below. So Jonathan, thanks again for coming to chat with me today and sharing your words of wisdom. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks so much, Ming. Again, it's always an honor when you invite me to speak or share with your students. I'm still humbled by it. So thanks for asking.